My name is Vincent John Espiritu, Program Director for JR Global Marketing. We're an international marketing company specializing in business-to-business lead generation. We cater to companies who are facing issues such as those who are having a long sales cycle, inability to prospect for new clients due to lack of bandwidth or resource, and also those who are wanting to penetrate other verticals, other regions, but doesn't have the necessary bandwidth. As a company, we face a lot of issues, right and left. One of them would be whenever we pass on leads to our clients, they would come back to us rejecting these leads for various reasons. One of which would be that the lead is not fit with the criteria they give us, so they come back to us asking to requalify on the leads or sometimes replace them. Another part of our problem is also the availability of a good database of prospects. So if, for example, a client would request for us to target a specific vertical in a specific region, and also having criteria such as revenue, employee size, and a lot of other things, we oftentimes end up with coming up with only just a small number of accounts. So normally, clients would come back to us with their feedback about the problems. They tell us that, well, the leads are not fit well with their criteria. They'll tell us the companies are too small for them to work with. Aside from that, companies may actually sometimes not that interested on their products or services. So there's a lot of things that they come back to us with in terms of rejecting or asking for the lead to be requalified. Also, feedback coming off from the database side of things. If it comes to a point where we cannot really find suitable prospects for the campaign, we will have to sometimes ask the client to provide us with their own database of prospects. These are those accounts which they've worked on before and perhaps they haven't closed any business with, so we're going to request that from them. This is a problem because we need to come up with a certain number of accounts to work with in order to produce a percentage of lead rate. So as a company, our service blueprint um, starts from, of course, winning the client and then passing on the project to the program management. Program management will then have to work with the client in determining what are the parameters of the program campaign, what are the expected deliverables, and also prepare the team for training about the client's products or services, and also the techniques that has to be used in order to come up with the leads for the client. After the training, then we move on to actually preparing the database. Preparing the database means that we're going to ask the client what are their target verticals, like what are the parameters. For example, what are what's the size of the employee of a business? Is it minimum 50, 100? Or if we cannot determine using that criteria, we'll use of their revenue as a determining factor how big they are as a business. Also, part of it is what are the locations that they're wanting to target? Is it only within the Philippines? Do they also wanted to reach out to neighboring countries such as Singapore, Malaysia? Also, industry. Is there a specific industry that their products or services cater to? Not all companies could cater to all industries. Sometimes their solutions are specific to just one industry. They have this niche market that they can only work with. After having all that prepared, we then move on to the team calling out on that database, doing cold calls, qualifying prospects, disqualifying them as well, and generating the BANTI criteria, which is budget, company should have the necessary funding in order to run a project. Authority, we need to find out how a decision is going to be made, who are the people involved, who are the influencers, and who are also the decision makers. Need, definitely we'd like to know what are the requirements in relation to our clients' products or services. Time frame, if a project is going to happen, when is it going to be? Is it going to be happening within the 3 month period, 6 months, or 1 year? That helps our clients determine how they should be preparing their pipeline. Last but not the least, environment. We'd like to find out if, in terms of number of employees, workstations, servers, and everything like that, is actually present in the prospect. Once after that's all been determined, once after a lead has been generated, we write up the lead report. The lead report then has to be passed on to the client for them to follow up on that prospect and hopefully turn them into business. Possible problem, or actually most common problem we face, is the database. Simply because sometimes the criteria they give us for their target prospect isn't really something that is easy to find. Sometimes we need to source the database from our own. If it's not available, we're going to go back to them and ask, is it okay if you share with us your own database of prospects? If that's not possible, we can also look into the option of buying from a third-party provider, sample of which would be account-based brokers, um, Jigsaw, Hoovers. So those providers we coordinate with in order to have a database available for the campaign. As for my recommendation on how to really solve the database issue that we commonly face, I'd say that, of course, one, find a very good updated database from our sources, either from the client side or from our own. If it's from our own, I think that we need to invest in a profiling team. The profiling team's role will actually be to always update the records in the database. Simply because if we have these companies in our records and then we call in to look for that particular person, chances are if it's not updated within like 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years, then sometimes or oftentimes the contact person is no longer with the company. So a profiling team within the company would actually help keep the records updated, make sure that the email record is correct, the direct line is also obtained, survey questions are being asked in terms of their size as a company, and that I guess will help us in long term for coming up with a good database for doing campaigns.